If you're waiting for a narcissist to suddenly grow a conscience, stop. That's not how this works. But there is something you can do that dramatically increases the chance they'll apologize. And it's not begging, arguing, or explaining your pain. If this resonates with you, pause for a second. Ask yourself, where am I still over-explaining my pain to someone who already understands it? Drop a comment with the word detach if you're ready to shift the dynamic, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Narcissists rarely apologize from empathy. They apologize from consequence. That distinction is everything. In healthy relationships, when someone realizes they've hurt you, their discomfort comes from empathy. They feel your pain, and that internal discomfort motivates repair. But with a narcissistic personality structure, the driver is not shared emotional experience. It's self-preservation. The apology is not sparked by your tears. It's sparked by what your withdrawal might cost them. Empathy requires the ability to tolerate shame without collapsing into defensiveness. Narcissistic systems are built to avoid shame at all costs. When confronted directly, "You hurt me. That was cruel. That wasn't okay," the response is often denial, minimization, blame shifting, or counterattack. This isn't because they're unaware. It's because admitting fault threatens the fragile self-image they work so hard to protect. Accountability feels like annihilation. Consequence, however, operates differently. When access changes, when your warmth cools, when your responsiveness shrinks, when admiration or availability decreases, the narcissistic system detects loss. Loss of control, loss of supply, loss of certainty. That is destabilizing, and destabilization creates motivation. The apology in these cases is often an attempt to restore equilibrium. It may sound reflective, even mature, but the underlying engine is not, "I understand your pain." It is, "I don't want to lose what this relationship provides me." The shift happens when the cost of not apologizing becomes higher than the cost of admitting fault. This is why pleading rarely works, explaining rarely works, emotional appeals rarely work. Those approaches assume empathy is the entry point. But when consequence becomes real, when boundaries are enforced, when access is limited, when you stop participating in the dynamic, the calculus changes. The apology becomes a strategy to regain stability. Understanding this protects you from false hope. It allows you to evaluate the apology not by its emotional tone, but by the behavioral change that follows. Because in narcissistic dynamics, words are often repair attempts for control, while consistent action is the only reliable indicator of accountability. Removing emotional supply destabilizes their control in a way that arguing never will. Emotional supply, sometimes called validation, admiration, attention, or even conflict, is the fuel that keeps a narcissistic dynamic running. It doesn't always look positive. Praise is supply, but so is chasing them for answers. So is defending yourself against false accusations. So is crying, explaining, reacting, proving, pleading. If they can provoke a reaction, they still have influence, and influence equals control. Control is the stabilizing force in a narcissistic personality structure. It protects them from insecurity, abandonment fears, and deep shame they cannot consciously tolerate. When you are emotionally engaged, even negatively, you are confirming that they matter, that they can move you, that they can access you. That access soothes their internal instability. The moment you begin removing emotional supply, something shifts. You become less reactive. Your responses shorten. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly. You no longer defend every distortion. You don't rush to fix tension. You don't chase after silence. The emotional charge that once fed the cycle begins to fade. To a narcissistic system, this feels disorienting, not dramatic, not explosive, just different. And that difference is destabilizing. They may initially escalate, provoke harder, criticize more, attempt to charm, love bomb, or guilt trip, because they are trying to restore the familiar pattern. If you react strongly again, equilibrium returns and they regain control. But if you remain regulated and consistent, the loss becomes tangible. They can no longer reliably trigger you. They can no longer predict your emotional availability. That unpredictability threatens the sense of dominance that kept them secure. This destabilization is often when apologies, promises, or sudden moments of reflection appear. Not necessarily from empathy, but from the realization that the previous tactics are no longer effective. Emotional supply was the glue holding the dynamic together. When you remove it calmly and consistently, the structure they relied on begins to wobble. Calm detachment is more powerful than confrontation, because confrontation still signals emotional investment. When you confront a narcissistic person with anger, intensity, or repeated demands for accountability, you may believe you are asserting strength. But in their internal system, your heightened emotion confirms relevance. You are activated. You are engaged. You are still orbiting the dynamic. That emotional charge gives them information and leverage. Confrontation also triggers their core defense, protection against shame. Direct accusations. You lied. You manipulated me. You hurt me, are experienced not as opportunities for reflection, but as threats to identity. Their nervous system moves into defense. Denial, gaslighting, projection, or counterattack emerge quickly because preserving their self-image feels urgent. The conversation shifts from what they did to how unfair you are being. The original issue disappears. Calm detachment bypasses this cycle. It does not argue, it does not demand, it does not try to win, it simply changes access. Your tone becomes steady, your responses become brief. You stop trying to convince them of your perspective. You stop participating in circular debates. You decline invitations to emotional chaos. The energy shifts from "you need to understand me" to "I understand what this is, and I will adjust my involvement accordingly." That shift removes friction, and friction was part of the bond. Without dramatic reactions, they lose the stimulation and dominance that confrontation provided. Calm detachment also denies them the narrative that you are unstable or overly emotional. When you are composed, it becomes harder to paint you as the problem. Psychologically, detachment creates ambiguity. They can't easily read you. They can't predict your next move. You are no longer signaling desperation to repair. That uncertainty unsettles a system built on control and predictability. Calmness communicates self-sufficiency. It suggests that your emotional regulation does not depend on their validation. This does not mean suppressing feelings. It means managing expression strategically. Confrontation seeks immediate validation. Calm detachment prioritizes long-term stability. And in narcissistic dynamics, the quieter shift in energy often carries more impact than the loudest argument ever could. Boundaries must be enforced, not explained repeatedly, because explanation without enforcement becomes negotiation. In a healthy relationship, you can usually state a limit once, clarify it if needed, and trust that the other person will respect it. With a narcissistic dynamic, repeated explanation often turns into an invitation for debate. They don't hear a boundary as information. They hear it as something to test, reinterpret, or override. When you keep explaining your boundary, I don't like being spoken to that way, I need honesty, I won't tolerate being yelled at, you may believe you are being clear and mature, but if the behavior continues and nothing changes in your response, the message they internalize is not the content of your words, it's the absence of consequence. Over time, your boundary becomes background noise. Narcissistic systems are highly attuned to patterns. If pushing past your limit results in long conversations, emotional appeals, or temporary tension that eventually resets, then the system learns that the cost of violating your boundary is low. In some cases, the repeated explaining even becomes supply, another opportunity to keep you engaged, defending, clarifying, and justifying. Enforcement shifts the dynamic. Enforcement does not require aggression. It requires consistency. If you say you will end a conversation when disrespect begins, you actually end it. If you say you won't respond to insults, you stop responding. If you state that certain behavior leads to reduced access, you follow through. No speeches, no dramatic warnings, just action aligned with your words. This alignment creates clarity. It removes ambiguity. It teaches that your limits are structural, not emotional reactions that can be worn down. When boundaries are enforced consistently, the narcissistic system faces a decision: adjust behavior or lose access. Without enforcement, there is no decision to make. Explaining appeals to understanding. Enforcement communicates reality. In dynamics where empathy is unreliable, reality is often the only language that produces change. Public image matters deeply to them because it functions as external regulation for an unstable internal identity. A narcissistic personality structure is often organized around appearance, reputation, admiration, and perceived status. The way others see them is not just social preference, it is psychological scaffolding. Praise, validation, and being viewed as admirable or superior help hold together a fragile self-concept that cannot easily self-soothe. This is why many narcissistic individuals are highly attuned to optics. They may curate how they are perceived at work, in social circles, within family systems, or online. They may present as charming, generous, successful, spiritual, victimized, or morally superior, depending on which image earns the most reinforcement. The external narrative becomes a protective shield. If others see them positively, it buffers against inner shame. Because of this, threats to public image can feel disproportionately intense. Criticism in private may trigger defensiveness, but exposure in public, or even the possibility of reputational damage, can activate urgency. It challenges the very structure that stabilizes them. This does not necessarily mean you should retaliate or attempt to humiliate. But understanding the weight of public perception explains why behavior may shift when consequences affect reputation. For example, they may dismiss your hurt privately, yet behave differently when their actions could impact how colleagues, friends, or extended family perceive them. They may suddenly become conciliatory if conflict risks tarnishing their good partner, great parent, or respected leader identity. The apology in these situations may be less about repairing intimacy and more about restoring image coherence. It's important to approach this insight carefully. Weaponizing public exposure often escalates conflict and can backfire. The goal is not public shaming. The goal is recognizing leverage points in the system. When their external validation stream is stable, they may feel little incentive to reflect. When it feels threatened, adaptability increases. Understanding how much public image regulates their internal world helps you interpret sudden shifts in tone, accountability, or charm. In many cases, what looks like remorse is closely tied to how the situation affects how they are seen. Silence can trigger self-preservation instincts because it removes predictability, and predictability is what allows a narcissistic system to feel in control. When you are consistently available emotionally, physically, digitally, they know where you stand. Even if there is conflict, even if there are arguments, your presence reassures them that the connection remains intact. Your reactions, your responses, your attempts to resolve things all signal continued engagement. Silence interrupts that pattern, not dramatic silent treatment designed to punish, not passive-aggressive withdrawal, but intentional regulated silence. Fewer responses, no chasing, no immediate replies, no long emotional paragraphs trying to clarify misunderstandings, just space. To a narcissistic structure, this can feel destabilizing. Without your input, they lose data. They cannot gauge your emotional temperature. They cannot measure their influence. They cannot easily predict whether you are still invested. That ambiguity activates uncertainty, and uncertainty threatens control. In many cases, silence initially provokes escalation. They may reach out more intensely, attempt to provoke jealousy, send emotionally charged messages, or act as if nothing happened. These behaviors are attempts to restore familiar engagement. If you react strongly, the system recalibrates and stabilizes again. But if the silence remains steady and emotionally neutral, self-preservation instincts can emerge. The internal calculation shifts from "I can manage this" to "I might actually lose access." That possibility, loss of supply, loss of admiration, loss of control, can feel urgent. The apology or conciliatory behavior that follows is often rooted in this urgency. Silence works not because it hurts them emotionally in the way they may have hurt you, but because it removes reinforcement. It communicates that access to you is conditional, not guaranteed. And when access is no longer automatic, the system is forced to adapt. Silence is powerful when it is grounded, not reactive. It is not about withholding love to manipulate. It is about protecting your energy and refusing to participate in a cycle that depends on your constant availability. Emotional neutrality removes their leverage because leverage depends on your reactivity. In narcissistic dynamics, emotional intensity is often the control point. If they can provoke you into anger, tears, defensiveness, jealousy, or desperation, they gain information and influence. Your visible emotional shifts confirm that they can move you. And if they can move you, they can steer the interaction. Reactivity creates openings. When you defend yourself passionately, you reveal insecurities they can later weaponize. When you argue intensely, you signal that their opinion still carries weight. When you become visibly hurt, they learn which words cut deepest. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human. But in a dynamic organized around control, your emotional transparency can be exploited. Emotional neutrality is different from suppression. It is not pretending you don't care. It is regulating what you display and how you respond. Your tone stays steady. Your words are measured. You don't rush to correct every distortion. You don't react to bait. You answer what is necessary and leave the rest untouched. This neutrality interrupts the reward system. If they attempt to provoke and receive minimal reaction, the tactic loses effectiveness. If they criticize and you respond briefly without visible distress, the emotional payoff disappears. If they exaggerate or accuse and you decline to argue, the conflict cannot escalate in the usual way. Over time, this reduces their leverage because the usual buttons stop working. They may attempt stronger provocations initially, testing for cracks in your composure. But consistency matters more than perfection. The more regulated your responses become, the less predictable your emotional shifts are to them. Emotional neutrality communicates self-possession. It signals that your internal state is not easily controlled by external manipulation. When leverage fades, the balance of power shifts. They can no longer rely on emotional triggers to maintain dominance in the dynamic.